Hey everyone, it's Austin, and welcome to Back to Basics, a Commander podcast, and I'm joined with my three favorite co-hosts today, Jason.
Hello.
Alex.
Hello.
And Kalen.
What's good?
Today we're going to do our normal segment when we start everything off, but then we're going to be talking a lot about the combat steps, so a lot of interesting conversations to be had today. But today, for our best card you're not playing, is Kalen. So, Kalen, what card should we be playing more of?
Well, we're gonna throw it back to the good old year of when did this card come out? 2013, I believe. And we're gonna talk about Nightveil Spectre. For those at home that are listening or don't know, Nightveil Spectre is 3 Dimir hybrid, so 3 Dimir hybrid pips for a 2/3 Spectre with flying. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of his or her library, and you may play cards exiled with Nightveil Spectre. So, I have played this card probably too much at this point. I put it in a deck on a whim, and it still has not come out of that deck. Mainly, I just love it because it's play instead of cast, so you can hit lands off of this thing. And, yeah, it can break parity for your deck. So say you're in a commander group, and you don't necessarily have a very big budget. You just put this in your deck, and then you can flip your opponent's Sensei's Divining Tops or fetch lands or things off of them and just take them. Just take them for yourself. They're yours now.
Kaylin has such a big crush on this card.
I love this
Well, I can confirm as someone who's actually stolen a Sensei's Divining Top with this card. It doesn't matter. Even if they try to blow it up, you can flip it, draw a card, put it back
Attack
on
them
someone else's
again.
library, and attack them again and steal it again.
Oh yeah, no, it's a really good card. Don't get me wrong. I love this card choice. But Kaylin has a special crush on this card that I've seen in Commander games that we have played.
Hey, I've won with this card.
I've seen it do work though. It's pretty good. It's got really good evasion. I mean, well, flying. It's got decent evasion, and it's really good, and especially like lower powered decks that you wanna be able to play off people's stuff.
You put it in the highest power deck.
His deck is not low power. That card is dumb.
Yeah, it is dumb though.
I play this.
Really good card.
I play this card in Kenrith.
Kalen obviously has a commander deck that he plays this in, and I think all of us have seen it do quite a bit of work. But the real question that I just want to ask him is, how many signatures are currently on it?
So there are 2 people's signatures on my copy of Nightveil Spectre. So the reason for that is because it has killed 2 people by punching them.
With the stupid 2/3.
Well, one of the times the person went to exactly 2, and then I killed them with it. The other time, I used Kenrith to make it like a 12-13 and just murdered someone with it. It was really funny. I haven't killed anyone with it for a while, but I haven't actually been able to cast it for a while. I mean, I haven't played that much Commander recently, but it's always fun when I play it. It's always fun when I play it. I have stolen some wild stuff off of this.
It's a good card. It's a good card.
It's a fun card. Yeah.
The greatest thing is to assemble someone else's combo with it, and then use it against them.
And then use their...
Yeah. Just a fun card.
One of these times you're going to hit either Saheeli or Felidar and just have the other piece in your hand.
Yeah.
And then just go off and be like, haha, I did it.
The thing is, everyone gets to see the bomb you've got too, right? Because the card is exiled face up, so all players can look at it.
Yeah.
So it's always like, what he hit? Uh-oh. And you're just like, yeah.
Yeah, no. But if you flip up counter spells or something that you can hold the play, like you can, like that sort of knowledge is great because you can hold the entire table hostage. By saying, I've got this counterspell, you can't cast.
The best part about Nightveil Spectre is it does not stay until end of turn.
Yeah.
Right, it just forever.
There's a big thing with, I mean, we're going to talk about this when we eventually talk about counterspells, but like, that's a very important piece to note from that, is like counterspells. I think a lot of people are afraid of revealing counterspells. They really shouldn't be. And that's one of the upsides of Nightveil Spectre, honestly. Personally, my own opinion. I love it when my opponents know that I have a counterspell, because then they'll play around it and they'll play poorly.
So. You also don't have to cast the spell with this. So if you're playing against like a graveyard deck and you're worried that you took their big reanimator target, you can just leave it in exile, and when it dies, it doesn't like go back to their graveyard or anything. It just stays there.
Yeah, and then obviously being able to hit lands, which is a really big deal, because I believe Thief of Sanity doesn't, right? It only hits
I don't think
non-lands. So. Although it fixes
your Thief is non-land, but you get to look at 3 of them.
Yeah,
yeah, you do get to pick, but Thief of Sanity's dumb. Don't play that one.
Well, it doesn't.
It's
hit
got one less
lands.
toughness.
Yeah,
Doesn't can't
one
play
less toughness.
lands.
It can't play lands, and it does fix your colors, but you're in a 5-color deck, so you don't care.
Yeah, play this in your 5 or 4 color deck. And if you steal, even if you're not in a 5 or 4 color deck, you can take your opponent's lands and then use them to cast your spell that you stole from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Or stealing somebody's Sensei's Dividing Top, like we mentioned before, which is nuts.
Yeah, that's
So-
definitely one of the better things. It's also really good against people that are trying to tutor things to the top of their library because you just play this and then you just like, give me that.
Yeah.
Nice Imperial Zoo you have there.
Yeah.
It's like playing Opposition Agent, except you're not a jerk.
Yeah, I just think it breaks parity on a lot of things.
It's just a really good. It's a solid like tempo and control piece. I think this is not an aggro card, and this is not a combo card, but it's very good in control shells because it grants you card advantage. Right, you're getting cards from your opponent's stuff, but on top of that, it's very good in these sort of random tempo decks where like it's a 2/3 flyer for 3 mana, so it's very easy to protect once you get it down, and it is going to give you that card advantage that lets you sneak out against your opponents too. So
Yeah, you're basically drawing cards from your opponent's deck.
it's very
It's
strong.
great. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of all the Spectres. I wish there were more of them, and I wish there were more like playable legendaries for them to make like some sort of Spectre tribal deck type thing work. But
Yeah.
here we are.
All right.
Anyway, into the combat step.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to hand this off to Alex because as our resident Najila player, he knows quite a bit about the combat step. So this is all you, my dude.
All right. So the combat step is actually it's broken down into 6 other smaller steps and phases. You have the beginning of combat step, which is when any triggers happen at the beginning of combat. And then you have the declare attacker step, which is you declaring which creatures will be attacking and where they'll be attacking. And then that's also when any on attack triggers happen, like for Najila, whenever a warrior attacks, this is when you'll make the warrior token. Or with Winota, it's when you'll look 6 cards deep for a human. And then the declare block steps is when your opponents decide what creatures they're going to block and with what creatures they will block with. And then you have first strike damage, which doesn't usually come up unless there's a creature with first strike in play. And then you got normal combat damage, and then the end of combat damage step, or the end of combat step. And throughout the entire combat phase, from declare attackers to end of combat, if a creature was declared as attacking or declared as blocking, it is considered an attacking or blocking creature. So if after you have a combat trigger, but you have a ninja in hand that you want to ninjutsu in, you can still ninjutsu in if an unblocked creature dealt combat damage.
Right.
Or after, because it's as long as it's unblocked. So if you attack with a first strike creature, you can deal first strike damage and then ninjutsu in a ninja and then deal damage again.
Yep.
It's like
a
pseudo
very
double strike.
Very important thing, yeah. Especially just very. I mean, I guess a lot of the powerful ninjas are blue-black. In fact, I think all of them are.
Yes, they are a blue-black
I'm trying to
tribe.
think if there's
Probably.
a random one that isn't from Modern Horizons.
Get up
or something.
old Scryfall and check that.
I believe every ninja is blue or black.
Yeah, and there are not a lot of blue or black first strike creatures, but there are a number of colorless ones that would work.
Mhm.
But either way, that's an important
they're all-
note to make, especially
They're all
for
blue or
decks
black.
that
you're
are
right.
outside of those colors. So
Yes, they are all blue and black.
yeah, and I think
One of
especially if you swing with a first strike creature, deal first strike damage, and then flash in. Oh, I don't know. What's the really gross one that I try to think of the name of?
Silent Blade Oni?
No,
Fallen
Maurice.
Shinobi.
no,
Right.
Fallen Shinobi. Yeah, Fallen Shinobi.
Eureka the Tiger Shadow?
I'm thinking of Yuriko. Yeah, I
Okay.
keep thinking of
Azula?
Azula, and I know that's not her name.
Yeah, her name.
Yeah.
No, her name's Azula.
That's
like
what I
in
was like.
canon.
You flash in Azula, and then people would be like, "What card is this?"
You just get her altered.
And for those who don't know who that card is, well, honestly, you've been living under a rock as a Commander player because she's apparently one of the most common commanders like in the game right now.
Yeah, she's
Yuriko?
popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see
She's
her all
pretty
over the
popular.
place.
Yeah, she's really, really popular, but she has Commander Ninjutsu, which is a very different style of ninjutsu that allows you to do it from your command zone, which is the reason why
It's
she's
just broken.
just dumb. But as far as actual text goes, so she's 1 blue black for a human ninja legendary 1/3. When a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, noted that not just herself but any ninja deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand, and each opponent loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost. And then has Commander Ninjutsu for blue black. So you return an
basically
unblacked
a-
attacker to your hand,
Yeah.
put it into the battlefield from your hand or the command zone tapped and attacking. So it can go in a deck that is blue black and then XYZ, or it can also be just your commander. And
Which is how most people
it's
do
nuts. So
Her as a commander, it's very, very good.
Mhm.
it.
Well,
I
And
played
it
against
does-
a couple of them.
There's a couple ninjas that are really expensive, like Fallen Shinobi and the Oni. That's like 8
Silent
mana.
Blade Oni?
Silent Blade
Yeah,
Oni.
Silent Blade Oni.
Silent Blade Oni's nuts, and then like Fallen Shinobi is just a sweet card. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
like Night Vale Spectre on crack. Like,
She is
it's
one
so
of the
cool.
one of the
Fallen
very
Shinobi
few.
is 3, 1 blue, 1 black. It's got ninjutsu for 2 and a blue and a black. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library until end of turn. You may play those cards without paying their mana cost. It's a
It's-
5/4.
It's a
It's
5/4. That's what's relevant
Yeah.
about that. That
It's a
card
house.
is huge.
It's
like-
gonna do a lot of damage.
wow.
It's
Also,
Great.
another
Yeah.
like notable thing you can do with ninjutsu during the combat step is if they try to swords when you're attacking creatures, you can ninjutsu and overtop
can
the swords of
ninjutsu.
Blaster.
It's like a
Yep.
flicker effect,
Yep.
basically.
And especially with like a lot of the ninjas, like some of the ninjas are really weak, but some of the ninjas, like we said, like Yuriko and Silent Blade Oni and Higure is kind of boring. And then what's the clone? Sakashima's student. That one's
Yeah.
kind of
well,
medium.
Miss Syndicate Naga is a really good one.
Miss Syndicate Naga is really good because it creates a copy of itself. It's a 3/1 for 2 and a blue, and I believe the ninjutsu is the same cost.
The thing is,
Yeah.
if you build your
but
Rico
it makes
Tiger
a
Shadow
copy of
deck
itself.
correctly, you're probably going to kill your opponents in 2 to 4 attacks because you play some really big, expensive spells.
Like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And you're-
temporal trespass.
And you're,
No,
and
you
you're
also
doing
play-
stuff with like you can do like Sensei Divining Top, Brainstorm, Scroll Rack to put those
Yeah.
giant things back on top of your library, and then just every time you hit, like the nice thing too, and something to know about, and to kind of understand about the way that triggers work is that when Yuriko and multiple people like hit, like when you. How do I say this? If you have 2 ninjas that hit your opponent at the same time, 2 triggers are put on the stack. So what you can do is you can, if you know the top card is, let's say, for example, Treasure Cruise, right? You reveal it, hit your opponents for 8, and then you can scroll rack it back on top of your library again for the second Yuriko trigger and do it again for another 8. So then you're hitting your opponents for 16, not counting the fact that Yuriko did 1 damage and the other ninja did whatever amount of damage. So
Yeah, this is insane.
it's
for
dumb.
a turn.
Like that's
Yeah.
the reason why she's one of the most popular commanders right now is also because she's like $8 or something. So she's really cheap.
She's $5 now. That was a
Well,
reprint.
but you're gonna get the etched foil because they're out now and they're cool, and the etched foils are only $8. So
Yeah, I guess. She also gets to play some really good cards from Commander Legends that we will not talk about.
yeah, we know 3 of them, honestly.
No, you don't. You don't play the third because you're never casting her.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
All right.
Commander Ninjutsu. Oh, the other thing too is that Ninjutsu gets around Commander tax too, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So
She and Lisa Shroud of Dusk are like the and Derevi
Derevi.
can get around.
Oh, yeah.
Commander tax.
or Edgar.
Edgar, yeah.
Any
Edgar.
eminence commander.
He gets around
are
it
you
because you
casting
don't
Edgar?
exactly. You're
No,
never
you are
casting it.
never casting Edgar.
It's like Oloro and then all the eminence commanders except a couple of them are kind of medium, so it doesn't really matter. But like
Well, the only medium one is the cat. One.
Oh,
So,
Okay, well, you've clearly never played against a really well-built Abaro deck. Because that crap
I'm trying
will
to
kill
think,
you
I'm
really
trying to
fast.
think of who they all
look,
are.
Alex and I play my girl Nala, and that's all I care about.
There's okay, hold on. What are all of the eminence commanders?
Aboro,
Arabo, Inala,
Edgar,
Ur-Dragon, and Edgar Markov.
Oh,
Also-
Scion. That's who I'm thinking. That's who I'm not.
Also,
thinking of. Or not Scion. Ur-Dragon.
Ur-Dragon.
Or Dragon.
we're gonna count what's his face? Oh, did you say
Oloro.
Aloro? Did you say Aloro?
Oloro, Derevi.
Oboro.
He just-
or no,
He
Aloro.
He doesn't-
Eminence.
He doesn't really have eminence, but he has eminence.
Yeah, and so does
They're
Derevi.
the two eminence, but not reallies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have the
It's a
keyword because the keyword
dumb.
didn't exist. but
Yeah.
They do things from your command zone that let you. They shouldn't do things from your command zone, but they do. So
And they're
Yeah.
impossible to deal with because your opponents can't interact with your command
eminence.
zone.
Eminence is a topic for another day, but all I'll say is that it shouldn't have happened.
No. Yeah, but
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
Yuriko, as we were saying, one of the very few damage-oriented, like combat-oriented commanders. Like some people play them, but
Yeah.
I feel like
That isn't like a Voltron-y deck.
right.
It's not necessarily
Exactly.
I
Voltron.
feel like people don't really care as much for combat in Commander. It's all about combos and one shots with like Craterhoof Behemoth. You're just like,
Right.
this board is huge, and then here's
That's-
Craterhoof Behemoth.
That's something I think is an important distinction when we talk about the combat step. Very specifically, obviously, one of the points we wanted to hammer home today is like just the fact that the combat step has so many different parts to it that are all important, right? And the way that you do them should be like you should start doing them more correctly because it allows you to sort of understand when to play certain spells and how to kind of evaluate what you're doing as far as the combat step goes. But I think what Caitlin is talking about is another point that I also would like to hit home is the fact that you shouldn't be afraid to attack people. Combat should be important. It is okay to build an aggressive deck where your aggressive deck doesn't just have like I had 30 elves in play, so I cast Craterhoof Behemoth. That's not winning via the combat step. That's basically like playing a combo.
However, I think every aggro deck should have a Craterhoof Behemoth style card.
Yes.
Well, no, not
So
every
overrun
one
deck.
needs one. Some are fine. Like they should have either a hoof or a combo to act as a finisher.
You want something to finish. So
Yeah.
with green decks, it's pretty easy because you have many effects like that, like God Eternal Ronas, Craterhoof
Well, like,
Behemoth,
if you
and
look-
Yeah,
Triumph
If
of
you
That's
look
Valor.
so
at the
bad.
Nagila deck, it is an aggressive deck that's trying to win through combat, but it's also playing a combo cards with Nature's Will and Derevi to try and
To go
facilitate
infinite,
an actual
get
combo
infinite
win.
attack steps, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think another thing, and I know that maybe I'm going to get some flack from this. I might get it from my co-hosts, probably not.
Nah.
Stop being afraid of playing Triumph of the Hordes.
Yeah, just play it.
Stop. Yeah,
Just play it.
that card.
If it's
is
gonna
just
end
good.
the game, it's like
Yeah,
just
I
play it.
here's the thing,
I
right?
understand. Oh, sorry,
We all understand. We all love Magic. Magic is a great game, and if you don't love Magic, stop playing it. But if you're playing Commander, the chances are pretty high that you love playing Magic. And just because this game ended, doesn't mean that the world is going to end. It just means you can play another game. Like that's what the
Yeah.
beauty. Like I have like 9 or 10 Commander decks right now, which granted I believe is too many, but that's not the point. I have a problem with deck building. What I think what it comes down to is that when a game ends really, really fast, like if I play a game of Commander and it ends in 30 or 40 minutes, that means that I still have a bunch of time to play another game. And then I could just
Yeah.
jump into another game with my decks. And granted, sometimes that means that I don't leave the shop until 4 a.m. But hey, that doesn't matter.
we've all been there together. It's
Well, it's one of those things where you show up at like 6 p.m. You play a game, it only lasts an hour, and you're like, yeah, I'll play another one. Now
And
it's
it
only
lasts
8
for
o'clock.
8 hours.
Oh, well, there we go. And then it's like it's 11 o'clock. I could sneak in one more hour game. I've had 4 beforehand. That'll work. One last game.
God.
6 hours later, we're all dying on the inside,
This
and
is-
we're all
this-
too proud to concede.
Concede.
I've
Go to
I've done
Perkins and
this.
have
Like I
dinner.
have
Yeah.
We've
been
all
I have
done
been the
this.
reason.
We
I've been the
have all
reason
done
for
this.
that.
This is
but
actually 100% the reason why we go to Perkins and not any other restaurant after Magic. It's because it's the only place open because we keep doing this to ourselves.
Yes, agreed. Real quick before we get back to the comic set, following up on that point, is that we admittedly all are, I think, a little bit more competitive than casual per se, but we do want to keep you casual players or a little bit more kitchen table-y, battle cruiser. We are trying to keep you in mind when we come up with these topics and when we talk about these topics. I know there's some people who are adamantly against combos, right? They don't believe in them. It takes all the fun out of Magic. And while I disagree with you for many reasons, if you want to play with that and you have a play group that wants to do that, then do that. But I still encourage, like we were talking about, having a finisher like Crater Hoof or something else to end the game sometimes. Some people really, really like grinding out those games in some weird combat oriented ways, and if that's you, enjoy the game how you want to enjoy the game. We are not trying to belittle you or say something like that, but personally, from like an efficiency standpoint, I encourage everyone to have at least a combo or a good finisher in their decks, just so they can be like, I want to end this game now, so we can go on to the next game, or we can be done with this. But there's some people who really do enjoy playing 3-hour battle cruiser, everyone build up their board state magics. I've played against them. I've met them at shops before, and if that's what you enjoy, you do you. You find a pod that really likes that type of play. Don't crap on people who want to play combos. At the same time, people who play combos don't crap on people who want to play that way. Everyone enjoys this game in a different way, and I think it's really important. And I think we want to talk about that as like just a whole topic one day. But I wanted to finish up the thought because I don't want someone listening like, well, I don't want to play combos, and then just shut us down. We're not trying to say that you're wrong. On a competitive scale, there's definitely some arguments over what is right and what is not. But in terms of enjoying the game, enjoy the game how you want. And I did want to throw that in for the people out there listening who enjoy building massive board states and doing weird stuff with combat, which is why we should get back to the combat phase.
Well, another like important thing for the combat phase, or for why combat is important once you get to higher level games, is the black deck of the table probably has like ad nauseum or necropotence in their deck, so lowering their life total makes those cards worse.
Yes, recognizing the deck that uses their life total as a resource and then pinging them away, even if it's just for 1 damage here, 2 damage there, can make or break their turn where they might be trying to combo off or do like a Nicol Bolas's Citadel. All right, Bolas's Citadel. Yeah.
Well, that's like, and you don't see it. You don't see it a lot in Commander, obviously, because the card is banned. But like in Legacy, and I don't think they do it at Vintage. I don't pay attention to Vintage enough, but like Legacy and then like Canlander and stuff, you see a lot of these decks that are like Tin Fins, where they put like Gristlebrand into play and then they like pay 7 life or whatever. The combat matters so much in decks like that, or against like you were saying with like Ad Nauseum and Necropotence and stuff like that, where like the difference between 15 life and 14 life in that deck is so huge. It is the biggest difference of life total in the entirety of the game for them. And it could be the same for any of these other players. Like when I built my old 5-color lands deck, I played Ad Nauseum in it because I could draw my entire deck of land, put it all into my hand if I had 37 or more life. Because the whole average curve of the deck was so minuscule. And
look at
it's just
Kirk,
it's
son
important.
of Yawgmoth.
Yeah,
a deck
100%.
like deck. If that's sitting across the table from you, I'm not saying like beat them up for absolutely no reason, but if you know
take them down for like 1 or 2 each turn.
Yeah, hitting them occasionally, it shouldn't be an act of war. And I see some people from all levels of play that if you hit them once, they take it as a personal offense to like their family. And then they're like, oh, this means war. And when you get that tunnel vision and you start focusing on this one person for absolutely no reason because they hit you for a point or 2 of damage, it's also not optimal play.
I think it's very important to talk about the that meme that we see quite a bit where like player X has attacked me for 1 point of damage, and then it's the picture of Saruman, and it's like, so you've chosen death. And it's like, I love the bottom half of that because I love Lord of the Rings, and I hate the top half of that because I hate that mentality of like the casual player that's like, oh no, he attacked me for 1, I better obliterate him, and that dude's like, I missed my 5th land drop and I'm not doing anything. Like, he's just like crying and dying in the inside. And
part of being the
it's
aggro player is recognizing like who at the table is the biggest threat to you. Who's gonna like if you're playing against combo decks, who's most likely to combo up first, or who's most likely to wrath you.
Yep, exactly.
Because if you know someone's packing their deck with wrath, you should focus them first to try and trigger it.
It is usually Kalen. You're not wrong.
If you ever play at a table with me, you should probably try and kill me first.
He's the antagonist of every story.
that is 100%.
He's also the antagonist of this podcast.
Yeah, clearly.
We're gonna play a commander game over spell table once. It's just gonna be you with arch enemy cards.
Oh,
this one makes us sacrifice our lands.
This one gives you 2 extra turns.
Yeah, that one's pretty dumb.
Yeah, sure.
Expropriate.
We'll talk. We're gonna have an entire episode about expropriate. I guarantee it. And I'm gonna come in hot.
I could talk 50 minutes about that card.
We are. Never choose extra turns. Continue.
That's not always true. I think a very important part is like the very beginning of combat step, especially now that they've sort of added that clarification step that they added to combat more recently in the rules, where you can move into combat, and once you're in combat, you then have a chance to crew vehicles or activate man lands or anything like that. And that's a very important step to remember as well. As far as like Alex, you can talk about this because I know that you know this step quite a bit too. And this is an important part of like things that we talked about before the podcast and things we wanted to cover. So
yeah, so one thing like that happens quite a bit in the beginning of combat step that a lot of people who play in Modern, especially in metas where there's control floating around, is beginning of combat, your team gets tapped by a cryptic command. Well, if your opponent somehow like taps your team before or in the beginning of combat stuff, you still have the ability to activate like a man land or flash in a creature and crew a vehicle and then attack with that.
Yeah, we saw this, of course, with Modern Affinity. Long live its memory. Long live its memory. Because I used to play Affinity. It's a really good point. In which, I'm sorry, guys, I have a cat who's really, really wanting to be in on the podcast too. But yeah, like you see this a lot, and being able to just activate a man land and potentially kill their planeswalker, kill them, do some other stuff like that. It's always a great time. It's a good thing to remember. Crewing vehicles is a really good point as well. So it's a cool little combat trick that is generally not always game deterministic, but it's niche, and you could find it being very relevant at times.
It's also something with and like this is a kind of a very specific point. Like it's not always man lands too, but like there have been games of Modern, because I play humans in Modern, where someone has been like cryptic tap your team, and then I'm like, sweet. After that resolves, either violin my Mantis Rider, boom, hit you for 3. So like that's always like a very relevant thing that like you need to consider. If you have a way to put a creature into play that has haste right away, like a flash creature that has haste for some reason, or just things like that allow you to still attack after you've been tapped down, which is a very common thing because it's a very common way of fogging people. So
good old cryptic.
Well, and just if you're playing a deck that is trying to use and abuse the combat step, going back to talking about like playing around wraths or playing around removal in those decks, you want to be playing some really weird cards you don't see a lot in Commander, like cards like Vines of Vast, or Blossoming Defense that can shut down spot removal against your creatures, or stuff like Heroic's Intervention, just something that can, for a one-time use, gives your board indestructible.
Veil of Summer.
Veil of Summer is really a very powerful card,
Staple in just about everything nowadays, so it gives you
Vines has a bunch of utility attached to it as well, because if your opponent goes to try and like put a piece of equipment on a creature, or like tries to target their Feldar Guardian with a Healy Rise minus ability, you can Vines their creature and then the ability fizzles.
Vines specifically states that they can't be targeted by spells or abilities your opponents control. It does not give hexproof. So there's a big the big interaction from Spellskite and stuff. So it's very, very important that you kind of understand like not only the different types of combat tricks, but just like the fact that you should be playing more of them. Like I know Kaylin had mentioned,
be aware of them.
Yeah, exactly. Playing around them is also a big point. But like earlier, before we started, Kalen had mentioned Boros Charm, which is a very important one as well. Boros Charm does a lot of different things. It also goes to the dome if you ever need to. But one of the main things is that it can give all of your permanents indestructible. So in response to a Wrath, in response to removal or Armageddon or anything like that,
Yeah.
that's a big
all
important
permanents,
piece.
not just
All-
non-land permanents.
Yeah, it's all
So-
permanents.
Yeah,
Another
that's
point.
really
Another
big.
point that is that it also gives a creature double strike. It's just a overall very good combat trick that you should either know about to play around or you should play more of. So
Yeah, especially if you're in Boris colors or Boris plus whatever, since those are usually more aggressive decks in the beginning, in the first place anyway. If you're playing Boris colors, they're usually a lot more like tokens or some aggro-y stuff. You don't see
some
a lot
equipment
of
stuff. And that's even
some equipment.
another thing too, is if you're in Boros, you also get things like Sunforger, which, and we can have an entire conversation about Sunforger, but like Sunforger being able to grab those combat tricks is a very relevant thing as well. So
Yeah.
But I think the
Play
different
Berserk in your green decks.
That's true. I think a big there's different types of combat tricks. One of them being the protection ones that you're mentioning. So the Vines of Vast with the blossoming defenses, stuff like that. There's the combat tricks that are like Teamer Battle Rage or Boros Charm kind of does double duty there, but like things that give like double strike or things that pump your creatures, not just giving them hexproof, but like making them bigger and making them out of the way of, whatever it may be, lightning bolts or whatever. But also there's a combat trick that I think we kind of hinted on but didn't really like connect to, which is like manlands are a type of combat trick where like you don't always need to like playing around a Wrath. One of the best ways is playing manlands because they're so hard to kill, right? Like that's just a big piece of the puzzle, and I think people should be playing more of all of that. So that's just my thing, I guess.
No, I love manlands. I don't see as much playing Commander as they do, and well, Modern doesn't have a ton anymore. Like back when you can still see them sometimes, and you'll see them like other formats. But they do some really good work, particularly if I find them really useful, especially for like if you're not playing a lot of creatures, but you might not have really good like answers to planeswalkers. They're a good, efficient way to handle that. I don't know. I really like manlands. I some usually have one or two in decks if I'm not like doing CDH or something like that. Even there, you might find one maybe. But they're really good. They're situationally really good. They give you an extra body for certain things. Mutavault's great in tribal builds if you're trying to reach another number. There's a couple of combos that might require you to have X amount of creatures, and having one on the field as a land can help you get closer to that type of thing. It's pretty good.
You just play good old Mistress Factory.
Play that Lumbering Falls, my dude. Hexproof.
Yeah, that one's really good.
Creeping Tar Pit, 3/2 unblockable. It's a really great way to take out. It's a great way to take out planeswalkers. I actually do run it in several like decks with Dimir stuff. Just I have one that doesn't run a lot of creatures, and so having that as a way to just be like, oh, I can hit your planeswalker, or I can start hitting you for 3 a turn if I have nothing else to do. It's still pretty good. So
very relevant.
I enjoy doing stuff like that.
Yep.
Play manlands in your deck.
Don't play Dryad Arbor though.
No, don't play Dryad Arbor.
Well, if you do, don't play the one that looks like a forest.
Yeah, play the good one.
Then I can't angle shoot my opponents.
Oh, weird how we don't want you to do that. But I think it's time to move on to that second part of the combat step. Like,
well, I'm never the one blocking, so
right.
Yeah,
well,
math is for blockers.
You can block and bounce or flicker or sacrifice your creature, which some people might not be familiar with.
If you are blocking a creature and then your creature is removed for whatever reason, like either you bounce it or it gets pathed or something, the creature that it was blocking is still considered blocked and won't deal damage unless it has trample.
Yes.
Trample still goes through as normal. There's not, and like you after blockers are declared, you can do pump spells and cheating or other combat tricks like that before damage.
Right. This is really good if you're playing like a flickery type of deck, like a Rune
Yeah.
deck, or you're running Ghostly Flicker or anything else like that, and you can block as long as they don't have trample, you can block the big bad whatever creature, and then flicker it and save your creatures for later, or maybe even get some good.
Giganosaurus may be a 10/10, but does not have any keywords attached to it.
No.
I think another really important thing to talk about here is something that for the longest time I didn't really understand. Like when I was more of a casual player before I started playing Commander, before I started playing Modern, where double blocking is completely fine to do. Something that I think doesn't get done enough and is very relevant is if for the baseline example is you have 2 grizzly bears in play, so they're 2/2s, right? And your opponent attacks with a 3/3. Double blocking is just beneficial for you, right? Because they can only ever kill one of your creatures, and you blocking was going to have one of your creatures die anyway, but then you still kill their 3/3, right? Like it doesn't deal 3 damage to both your dudes, it only deals 2 and then 1. Now obviously it opens you up to things that you need to think about as well, because a pump spell would blow you out, it would kill both your creatures. A removal spell does the same thing, right? So it's something to think about both on the attackers and the blocker step, is that there's a lot of really key points there. So once you move into the combat step, so you elect that you're leaving your main phase, priority is passed around the table, and then you're in the combat step before the attacker step. So that's when people can activate man lands. This is when people can do things like tap you down your team, all that stuff. And priority is passed around then as well. And then you get into the attacker step. Once attackers are declared, that's when all of your triggers happen, and then priority is passed around the table for each of those triggers to finally go off. And then after all those triggers go to happen, priority is then passed again before you move on to the blocker step, right? And then once blockers are declared where they need to be, priority is passed around the table. Any triggers from blocking happen, and then priority is passed again to move on to the damage step, the first strike damage step. Now, all of those points where I noted that priority is passed around the table, those are very key points, because that's where all of your combat tricks are going to come in. That's when all of your cool things that you can do, activated abilities, anything like that, that's going to make it so that your opponent has trouble with what they're doing. Either whether you're blocking or attacking, those are all important key pieces, and I think it's really important to understand that. I honestly think that despite the fact that the Najeela primer goes over it, one of the most important things to do is that graphic that you shared to us, Alex, from that Najeela primer. At least I assume that's where it's from.
Yeah, it is.
That graphic is so good. I may even just put it over this video here for a bit, because I think everyone should know it. Like, it's so important to know. And all of these points that I've kind of hammered home are things that I have as an L1, and also as someone who's played with a lot more casual players for like pre-releases or just Commander games that I oversaw the happening or whatever at our local gaming store. They're all things that have happened that people had no idea that it can do. When I was like, well, why don't you double block there? He was like, how do I get out of this? And I'm like, well, you could double block that creature. And then he's like, you can't block with more than one creature. And I'm like, yeah, you can. You're absolutely allowed to. You can block with your whole team and murder that guy if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
That's an option that you have available to you. Granted, there are things you can do things that your opponent could do that could make it worse for you. But there are a lot of people that just didn't understand that you could cast spells then, or that you could activate abilities then, or that you could, do any of that stuff. It's just crazy. And then another example, and this is obviously a kind of really weird and niche example, but I saw somebody attack with a Steel Hellkite, which, for those of you who don't know what Steel Hellkite does, man, are you in for a world of text.
Yeah.
I believe it's a 5/5, but it could be a 4.
Oh, yeah.
6 mana 5/5.
It's a 6 mana 5/5 with flying that has pay 2 generic, give it +1/+0 until end of turn, and then pay X to deal X damage, or to destroy each non-land permanent with CMC equal to exactly X that an opponent controls that it dealt damage to this turn.
Well, it's a triggered ability that happens when it deals combat damage.
Oh, is it a trigger? I thought it
not
was an
cost.
activated.
It's a triggered ability.
Okay, so either way, it's a triggered
You
ability.
can only activate this ability once each turn.
Exactly.
So you can't just blow their whole board up.
Right,
Yeah.
but what I've seen happen is giving that creature first strike, dealing damage to your opponent, and then using X to blow up a bunch of their other blockers so that all of your other creatures survive combat damage.
That's
Like
pretty,
that.
That's pretty fun.
That is so important, I think. So like it's just all these different like weird interactions that you can do with things that like you could just get, like thinking about this and evaluating the way that this works and the way that all these little tiny bits of the combat step making up the entirety of the combat step is very important to understand. So anyway, that's enough of my ranting. Everyone else can talk now. I just had a lot to get off my chest there. So
No, it was well said though.
Yeah.
For sure. If you ever have questions, don't be afraid to look up rules or anything else. I've been a part of at game shops, especially back in my hometown, not in Iowa with these three duds.
Okay.
I'm gonna kick you.
But back in my back in my hometown, we had a lot more really big casual commander scene, and they had a whole point system to try and encourage more casual and battle cruiser type play. There's a whole thing, but a lot of people would have questions about a card, and they'd be like, "No, I'm just sure how this works," and then they just do it, and like most everyone at this point has a Google device, right? A phone that can access Google in some way, shape, or form. Most shops also offer free Wi-Fi. Most, not all. And then there's also usually players that have more experience, or even judges around. Or most shop owners have a good understanding of rules.
Don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, my point is that
as a judge. I was a judge. I guess I'm not anymore because I'm not going to pay for it. But as an ex-judge, at least, I love being asked rules questions because it means that I'm at least valued in the fact that I took time to learn all those rules, right? And so we love, like, if you I may complain when I'm sitting at our gaming store and our good friend Joe, who's a jerk, who has an entire commander deck based around banding, asks me to come over and make a ruling in his game. Like, I may be like, Joe, why are you doing this to me? What are you doing? But like, I actually love that. Right? Like, I love getting down, like sitting down, looking at the board and just like piecing all of that out. It's almost like putting together a puzzle. And like a lot of judges love that, where they just love finding the weird interactions in the game, because that's all Commander was. Commander was a format made by judges who were bored, and they just wanted to like create a format where all of the weirdest interactions could happen. And that is 100% why Commander exists today.
Yeah, but
like,
man, banding is it's like
not a mechanic that we should ever print. Stop.
It's a freaking novel.
Nightmare.
The rules text is a novel. Like, all the rulings made on it.
If you don't know what banding is,
don't
feel free to
look it up.
No.
Look it up. I'm not going into it.
You understand why we're ending the conversation here about it right now.
Here's the thing. Maybe I'll upload a video of me just explaining all the rules text for banding. It'll be longer than this episode. I just want to clarify that. But
like 2 hours.
I could do that. I don't want to.
Most of them are pretty bad anyway. So
yeah, most of the cards with banding are pretty bad. But that's not the point. We as judges love making rules calls, basically. And even if you know a friend who's a judge, like, we have a local Discord group that is just like all of the players in our local meta, and or at least a bunch of them, all the cool ones anyway. We actually have
well, I should not have been invited then.
We actually have a role called judge, where if you have a judge question, the people that have been elected these roles, Alex and myself included, you can at that role, and then one of us will get a ping on our phone for a judge call. And like, obviously the system doesn't always have to be that complicated, but like, if you know a judge, don't be afraid to text them or call them or whatever and figure that out. If it's 3 a.m. and he has a wife and 2 kids, don't do that. But just don't be afraid to ask a judge. Like, there are so many resources out there, and something that even as a judge, I don't know every ruling that I've ever, like, every ruling that I've ever made, I've never known all of them, especially the ones that involve the card Spellskite. That's not the point.
Oh my god.
I have Googled specific interactions between 2 exact cards, and there's already an answer on Google for it. Like, someone else has already been a sad sack that has had to gone through this situation and been like, oh, okay, I guess this is how it works, right?
Just moving a little bit back to the combat step and complex interactions with the combat step. If you want to have some fun and make some people concerned about what's going on, just play, and if you can afford it, it's a little bit more of an expensive card. Play Raging River.
Oh my!
All right, we're moving on. We're not talking about
No,
this card.
no.
We're done.
Guys, no.
How about
No, 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 no,
camouflage?
no.
I hate this card.
We are
if
so
you don't give me this,
Camouflage?
I will
No.
make it a. If you don't give me this, I will make it a best card you're not playing. It is played in 110 decks.
It's actually
There's
not a
a
bad
reason-
card either.
There's a okay.
When the trees
where-
start sounding like Raging River.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know what Raging River is,
Oh my
it's
God.
red for an enchantment. When you attack non-flying defending creatures your opponent's control, have to divide between the left and the right side of the river. And then after that has been done, you divide your attacking creatures between the left and the right side of the river. And only creatures with flying or on the same side as the river can block a creature can block that creature.
Yeah, it's dumb.
What are you talking about? It's great for mind gaming your opponent if you're playing a deck that's trying to have like 2 or 3 creatures in play.
We can absolutely have an entire episode about mind game cards, and I'll let you talk
Like
about
camouflage.
that one for us.
Oh yeah.
Stop. I am not in the mental capacity to be able to handle this conversation at the moment. Let's move on.
Just for the viewers at home, please look up camouflage after you're done watching or listening to this video. I'm not gonna say it because it is a novel of a Magic card.
It really is. It's got a lot.
Just look it up. Look up the original printing and see if you can figure it out, and then look up the Oracle text because it does something completely different.
You guys don't want to talk about Chain of Mephistopheles?
No, stop.
No.
Okay, back to the combat step. We've been off topic so many times.
Camouflage is a
I
card that uses the
apologize,
combat step.
Back to the.
I might have to get a copy of Camouflage.
Stop.
We are
Back
all
to
over the place
combat
today.
step.
Let's,
That's totally
let's focus
fine.
Up.
One thing that I think another important distinction is the difference between first strike damage and regular damage.
Last strike
Um,
damage.
What?
Last strike damage. This is a
Technically-
stupid thing from the onset.
Honestly, I think it should be real. That's not the point. First strike, regular strike damage. Very different combat steps where priority is passed between them, right? There's a lot of, like, we've already talked about it a little bit with ninjutsu, right? Where, like, a first strike creature deals damage, and then you can ninjutsu in a creature, bouncing that one back to your hand, and then hit with regular strike damage. These are all really important bits. Like, this priority is passed a lot in the combat
Yeah.
step. It's a very
Yeah.
It's
important
like
step.
4 or 5 times where you get priority passed in the combat.
Assuming no combat
4, 5, 6.
So long as the
Six
person
times
doesn't
with no
it's
combat.
passed.
So long as people
Yeah.
don't skip through the steps like goobers.
Well, like first strike usually just gets skipped through because
There's no
unless
creature
there's a
with
first.
strike.
Yeah, it only really matters if there's a first strike creature.
Yep.
Right.
Also, slightly off that, for the few of you who might not know this, if you want to do something for combat for whatever the reason, if you have a trigger during any combat step, there's a couple cards that do that, and your opponent just skips right through it, they still have a combat step. So they don't just get to go, I play a land, pass the turn. Like, technically, all those phases do happen. So if you have things to do during any of the phases for whatever the reason, you can be like, whoa, we have to go back to your combat step.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
even
can't skip your
Miko,
combat step.
even
Um,
Miko and Arena do that, where they're
The
like
orig-
combat.
the one that matters that in more competitive sense for from quite a few years ago is oh gosh, Desolation Demon. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Oh my
Two
gosh!
two
that
black
card.
black for a 6/6 and with flying, and at the beginning of combat, your opponent may sacrifice a creature to tap it and put a 1/1 counter on it. So that it can't
Desecration
attack you.
Demon.
Desecration Demon.
Yeah, Desecration.
Yeah. it's-
Yeah,
that-
standard
and
all-star Desecration Demon.
Standard All-Star, it was like a big deal to like, well, you can't just skip through your combat
Huge.
step. Technically, I will ask you, would you like to sacrifice a creature to tap this down? Like, it's just like one of those weird things.
Yeah, they might
So-
have a flash
It's weird things,
creature.
but there are a couple cards like this that interact with either a combat or a main phase or something like that. And if
Mhm.
your opponent just goes land pass and you really want to do something, just be like,
Yeah.
no, we got to go back to your step. Like, just a quick little thing. Some people, I've played against some people who are like, wait, that happens? I'm like, yes, that happens.
You still
just
get
for
your,
the few of
still
you-
get your things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a few of you out there who might not know that, that does happen. So make sure you use it to your advantage.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to the combat trick thing too, this is not very organized. That's fine. Going back to the combat trick thing too, like that priority doesn't just have to be instant speed things. It doesn't have to be removal. It doesn't have to be combat tricks. It can be flash creatures. It can be
Activated abilities.
activated abilities. It could be, anything like that. Those are all important things to take away and to look at. And that's like one of the biggest things with knowing what and how to win a game, in not necessarily just a competitive sense, but just kind of leveling up your play a little bit, especially in Commander where all these weird rules interactions happen. It's important to know when you're able to do things, especially during the
Watch
most
out
important
for route. That's may say sorcery, but it's an instant.
Oh my god, route. Yes.
step.
Settle the wreckage.
Specifically,
Yeah,
the
settle.
conspiracy art though.
With
You don't play the
Elishnorn?
original with the one with Elishnorn on it. Yeah. So anyway,
I mean, it's like a 7 mana instant destroy all creatures. Well, buries them. It destroys can't be regenerated.
mm-hmm.
Good old route.
Anyway,
Classic staple of EDH route.
I don't think I've seen it.
another
Well,
thing
it only takes getting someone with a card one time, then they'll play around it for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
that is not true. I never play around Settle. I
play-
I have been blown out by that card far too many times, and I still die to it. I'm always just like, they can't have anything, and then I swing, and then I die. Like,
You die to settle the wreckage.
yeah, all the
My
time.
motto, and Alex specifically, I'm pretty sure can attest to it because we play test a lot, is play as if you're never punished. And boy, am I not punished as much as I should
Yeehaw,
be.
cowboy magic.
Oh yeah, we got some stories.
Our
a
playtesting
thing
sessions
for another
get
day.
crazy when.
My last point that I want to talk about, something that is very important. By the rules of the game, creatures are considered attackers all the way through the combat step after they've been declared as attackers.
Mhm.
Now you may think, well, that's worthless. No. Cards like Maze of Ith or Mystifying Maze is a really good one, actually. Or Najila. Or just, all these cards that say do X with an attacker. You can do after damage has happened. So you can attack with your giant moron, hit them in the face for a bunch of damage, and then Maze of Ith it to untap it so that it basically had vigilance the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, it's just
Kinda
something
dumb.
that you're able to do. Another thing is, like I said, Mystifying Maze. Mystifying Maze is the one that basically does Maze of Ith, except it flickers it, so you get an extra ETB effect after you've attacked with it.
I'd love to
So-
stay on Maze of Ith for just a second because it's actually one of my favorite
I
low to the
love
ground.
Maze of
Well,
Ith. Oh, that card's so
I
good.
think it's not a big combo. I get a lot of people with this at new shops, and obviously some people know this trick, but like with Argothian Elder or Ley Weaver, they're both 4-drops, 1 green, 3 colors, 2/2s that untap 2 target lands. Argothian Elder's elf and Ley Weaver is a human druid. But what they do is you can go to combat. And then you can make infinite mana during the combat step with Maze of
Yeah.
Ith. And this is one of my favorite backup combos for Elf Ball that I run. And I really love it with Ley Weaver specifically for not Elf Ball, but because it combos with Lore Weaver, and that is just a win on its own. So you can move the combat, and then you swing with Ley Weaver or Argothian Elder at whoever, and then you just Maze of Ith, and you can activate it to untap it, and then untap Maze of Ith in a land, and you can just make infinite mana, which can dump into a Walking Ballista, which can dump into an
Or
Asuri,
Helix Pinnacle.
Helix,
Yeah.
any sort of mana dump that you want that you can do at instant speed, this works for. What I really love this for is for Ley Weaver, though, with Lore Weaver, because Lore Weaver pays 7 mana to 2 blue, 5 colorless to draw. Target player draws 2 cards.
Yeah.
You can deck out your opponents.
You can deck all your opponents because you can put all those triggers on the stack so that they all just go off, and they will draw. All of them will have to be forced to draw 1,000 cards, and you can do it all in a row, so it just triggers, and they'll have to draw out their deck. You can do it to yourself if you have a Lab Maniac out or a Jace Wielder of Mysteries out.
An important thing to note from that combo is that Ley Weaver and Lore Weaver both have partner with the other
Partner.
card. So
Right,
when you
that's
play
probably
one of
something I
them,
should have mentioned. Yeah.
when you play one of them, you target yourself, and so partner with X, like a specific name, has a rule where if you play one of them in the ETB, you can target a player, and that player can search his or her or their library for a copy of the other card. So if you play Lore Weaver, you can go get Ley Weaver.
I love this combo. I catch a lot of people by surprise because it's a lot lesser known, but it's a great way to. It's a great combo that, especially with Ley Weaver and Lore Weaver, are literally just together. If you can find Maze of Ith and you find one of these two cards, they literally go together, and they offer you a really cool combo.
And when you're in green blue to make them work, because Ley Weaver is green and Lore Weaver is blue.
Lore Weaver is blue.
And green has a lot of good ways to search out lands, as it turns out.
Yep.
So it's a really easy way to combo off.
It's a personal favorite combo of mine. It's a good combat trick. I have to explain this and pull up rules actually somewhat constantly with this because people are like, that's not how that works. And it is. It's awesome. I love this combo. Put it in your decks. Take people by surprise. It's great.
Yeah, the one thing to note is that it doesn't work with what's Thematic Compass that switches into
That
Spires.
says opponents.
It says opponents only. Or if it specifically removes it from combat, it doesn't work. Because it's no longer an attacker. So you can't untap it.
But like going back to like with giving creatures like pseudo vigilance, reconnaissance is a really good enchantment to do it with because it's a 1 mana enchantment has an activated ability for 0. Remove target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it.
Yep. So it basically is it's a mono blue way of giving your creatures vigilance forever.
It's mono white.
Or mono white, excuse me.
That's good old uncommons from Exodus.
Yeah.
There's fun stuff that you can do throughout the combat stuff like that super great, and it usually catches people by surprise. If you have the money, you can do a combo like that with Bazaar of Baghdad and mill yourself out and win with Jace. Just saying. It also works, but that's
Let's not advertise Bazaar on this podcast.
That's adding an extra $2,500 to your deck. But it
I
also
don't know
works.
about that much.
The frog players have hard enough time trying to find that card.
Yeah,
only $1,740, not $2,500.
Okay.
I think that's a great place to end today on, where we're
Bazaar
talking about
Baghdad?
how you should all go buy a Bazaar of Baghdad.
Bazaar of Baghdad.
Everyone should own one.
It's only $2,000 of your hard-earned money. Just go get one.
Don't buy a car. You don't need a car. Go buy a Bazaar of Baghdad.
Go get a Bazaar of Baghdad.
Yeah, that moment when cardboard's worth as much as a down payment on a car.
Oh my god.
All right. That's definitely a good point to stop at. We're gonna get flustered after this. So just a couple of the quick reminders here at the end. Obviously, we would love it if you like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that stuff over here on YouTube. If you're watching, if you're listening on any of the side platforms, I will say that we are getting on a bunch of those side platforms. We don't have anyone like very specifically picked out yet, but things like Spotify, Apple Music, all of your other stuff, anywhere you can find podcasts, we're going to be put up there here pretty soon. So go check us out. We'd really appreciate it. Follow over there. Again, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. We also just want to talk about it here and kind of hammer it home. If you have any topics that you want us to talk about, leave a comment. Talk about if you want us to just talk about our favorite decks, or you want us to do a deck tech over the decks we've discussed, or even just like a various topic about Commander that you think more people should know about, something like that, just shoot us a comment. We can make an episode on it, because we'll sit there and talk about Commander for hours on end. So that's that's like why this podcast exists. So yeah, do either of you guys have anything to add there?
No.
We're setting up social media. We should have a Twitter and Instagram by time this episode is posted. We'll put the links in the description. Like, comment, subscribe, follow. And shoot us messages, and we'll be posting episode updates and probably some fun Magic memes or something else, and just try and be interactive with all of you fun listeners. So, find us out, and like I said, we'll probably post the link in the description.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have been back to basics. We're going to remain back to basics at least. I'm Austin, joined by Kaylin, Alex, and Jason, and we will see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody.
See you guys later.